Okay, first of all, these Buddha statues over here, these are very important to me. It's one of the places whenever I go to India, I would always like to go to Sanat and the museum there. Because I did hear the original of this statue is in that museum, and next to Sanat, outside of Benares. And the first time I went there, I was looking for it, see where I could find it. And there was no people to guide you where to go. Eventually I did turn a corner of the museum and I saw it at the end of the corridor. And honestly, I burst out crying. I was a monk at the time, but it really had so much of an impact on me. I was so inspired that I couldn't help myself. And the next time that occurred, I led a pilgrimage to India. The same thing happened, although this time I was prepared. I had lots of tissues. But it still happened. I don't know why, but the original is just one of the most beautiful Buddha statues in the world. And to this day, I don't know why it affects me so much. But a third time, I went to Sanat on pilgrimage, and I told all the travelers with me that I'm looking forward to going into the museum at Sanat outside of Benares and just to do a worship to the most beautiful Buddha statue I'd ever seen, which makes me cry. And I told everybody, they were all had their cameras ready, waiting to catch me crying. And then when I turned the corner and went into the gallery, the corridor, I never cried. They were doing renovations. And they had this big tarpaulin over the Buddha statue as a worker was painting the roof above it. And that was so disappointing, but it taught me an important lesson. You cannot have expectations. And I thought I missed out. And I thought, oh, how terrible that was. But then the worker, who was obviously a local man, he couldn't speak English, I couldn't speak Hindi. He looked at me, and he looked at the tarpaulin, and took off the tarpaulin. And that was the best, because it taught me you can't expect anything, and the best joys and happiness of life are something you can never predict, and it happens, and how beautiful that is. I know it's something to do with the talk this evening, because it's about something to do with the future, isn't it? What is the talk this evening, the title? Antidote to the fear of the future. That's a good antidote, because I was afraid I wouldn't see it again. But then, just no expectations and gratitude to what you've already had, that sort of overcame all that fear. So I'm very happy to bless these. I'm very happy to sign your books and put funny faces on the first letter of Ajan. I do a very good bear A. I did try one cat or kitten A. That didn't come out too well, but I did the best I could. Because it's nice to have fun, whatever you're doing, and don't really worry how it turns out. Just give it a try and see what happens. That's always been what I've done in life. And sometimes there's fear of the future, antidote to the fear of the future. A lot of time is that positive energy. And I always tell people to live a positive life. Always be positive in all things except one: COVID testing. Don't be positive there. But what you're doing by having that type of mind, we can see fun in anything, is it means that you are developing a very, very good attitude, and because you see things in a really good light, you actually create the future with much more happiness, with much more joy. In all the years I've been a monk, it's been amazing just how your positive attitudes can create wonderful futures. And I say that so many stories from the past which makes this feel so true. I think you all know that I got in trouble many years ago because I opened the door for giving full ordination to women as bhikkhunis. And of course, I thought, what's going to happen there? That might be difficult. But before we even got to that point, we had to have a place where they could stay. You can't just ordain a bhikkhuni and just leave her sleeping on the streets. That's not right. So we had to find a place. And for me, you can't have it less than what the monks have. It has to be equity. So we looked and we looked and we looked and we looked. Land is very expensive in Australia. Very big, very large, but cost a lot of money. So we started fundraising. And you know what happened when we were fundraising? $10 here, $20 there. And you can't buy any land for $10 in Australia. But one thing occurred which I will never ever forget. A gentleman who was Australian, Caucasian, he came, he wanted to see me for something. So he drove up to Bodhinyana Monastery and he got out of his car and he told me that his wife had just given birth to their first child, who happened to be a daughter. He said he was a Buddhist, but I hadn't seen him before. And he said, I hear you are building a monastery for women, giving them a chance. And I said, yeah. And he said, I've just given, or my wife has just given birth to my first child, and she's a girl. I want her to have the chance, if she wants to. She probably doesn't want to, but if she wants to, I want there to be a monastery there for her, to give her that opportunity. I want to make a donation to your fundraising. And what he did next, I'm usually a very calm monk. But when he told me how much, my hand was shaking. Honestly, 250,000, $250,000. And that just gave that project such a boost. And where it came from was so beautiful. Just he had his reason for doing that, just given birth, and he could afford it, and he wanted to do something wonderful, just in case his daughter ever wanted to become a Buddhist nun. And I thought that was so sweet and cute. And because of that, I always loved telling that story. And I've never met him again. He disappeared. For years I thought, was that a kind of heavenly being? I did think that, because heavenly beings do stuff like that. Sometimes weird stuff happens. If you're a good person, sometimes his heavenly beings come to the rescue. I did tell this story when I was in Kuala Lumpur, because many people, they know I was a theoretical physicist, which is one of the hardest sciences. I'm not talking about difficult to understand, but just got to be very strict that whatever you do is logical, provable, and is not just a supposition. So, when they were asking me, do you believe in all this weird stuff of Buddhism? I said, no, I don't. I know it's truth. I was speaking as a scientist. I've just seen too much in all those years I've been a Buddhist monk. So far, I've been a monk now over 48 years. That's a long time to be a monk. Most people if you are working even as a CEO, when can you retire? After 40 years? 45? 48? No. I'm not allowed to retire. But anyway, I'm enjoying my life, doing whatever service I can. And because 48 years is a long time, I know many of you, especially sitting in this front row over here, seen you so many times before, and it's lovely to see you again. And also, it gives a sense of credibility that you're not some sort of monk who just comes into Singapore and leaves next week. I do, but I come back again. And because of that, many of these stories, you know, are true. I don't make them up. So on this occasion, I was a young monk, and I was walking along in the mountains of northeast Thailand, in a set of mountains called Phupan. And at that time, in 1978 or something, there was hardly any development there. Just a few villages. The road was just a dirt road, no electricity. And as I was walking, it was lovely and quiet and lots of solitude. And even just to keep you awake, even ghosts, real ghosts. Because I stayed in one of the monasteries on that journey, and I was walking to the town of Sakonakon. It was about 60 kilometers to the north, and there was only tiny villages on the way, if you managed to find them. But I asked the head monk in this monastery, are there any caves on this journey? And he looked at me and he said, yes, there are. There's a very well-known cave. Many of my monks, he said, have gone and stayed in that cave and gone mad. There's a very dangerous ghost in there. And I said, I'd like to see it. Are you sure? He said, yeah. And so he told me where it was. And it was very conveniently located, halfway on the journey between this monastery, it's, what was it called? Tamsi Gao. Ajahn Sawat was the monk's name. And it was just halfway on the journey, convenient place to stop overnight. So I was walking all day, I found that cave, and once I found that cave, one of the villagers took me to it and explained everything about it. In the cave, in such a remote area, there was a very old Buddha statue, not like this one, ancient Buddha statue. People had used that place to meditate, or as monks to just pass the night for so many hundreds of years. A very beautiful Buddha statue. There was a lovely spring outside with very clean, fresh water. I was kind of surprised why the villager who took me there wanted, to show me everything very quickly and leave. And that's when he told me that in the back of that cave there was a skeleton. That was the cave where the ghost was. And even the layperson didn't want to stay there. So I quickly had a shower, just getting with a little dip of water, throwing it over myself to wash, as you did in those days. Dried myself off, sat down on a little bench inside the cave, and it was pitch black, no electricity, and then waited. I wanted to see that ghost. I was a scientist. As a scientist, you can't be afraid of the truth. You want to actually see it and find out if there really is a ghost there. And what do ghosts look like? Why do ghosts only come out at night time? What do they do during the day? So anyway, I waited and waited and waited. No ghost came. And I was very tired, walking all day in the hot sun. I got so tired that I thought, the ghost is not going to turn up. So I lay down. Remember, there was no lights there at all. I lay down, and as soon as I lay down, nowhere near sleep yet, as soon as my head touched the folded robe on which it was resting, you heard something running towards me. I don't know if that's good visual sound effects, but that's the best I could do. And it stopped about a foot in front of me. Now, it was dark. I could not see anything, just here. And I told that ghost, I'm fed up with you. I've been waiting here for hours, and now you want to come? Get out. I think I told you this afternoon that human beings do have much more power than ghosts if they want to exert that power. And I did that because I was fed up with the ghost. Yeah. And so I turned over and went to sleep, and that was it. Sometimes, if you're not afraid of ghosts, you don't tend to see them as easily. In other words, you're not that interested. But anyway, hearing it was very easy, and that certainly happened. But the reason I tell that story was the next day, when I continued on my journey, it was just so a remote area that I started to get very thirsty. My water bottle had run out early in the day, and there was no streams, no wells, no villages. So I really was thinking that, this may be really bad for my health. I was dehydrated. But as I was walking along, dehydrated, wondering what to do, and when would ever I see the next village, at a ridge of the mountains, in the valley, I saw a village. You could see by the corrugated iron roofs of the huts. There's about 5 or 6 huts were down there. So I decided to test out a theory as a scientist. The theory started out by an old story of forest monks many years ago, and this one monk who's called Ajahn. And Ajahn, during the Second World War, had gone to meditate and learn from teachers in Burma. In those days, you didn't need visas, you just walk, and no one would ever stop you. But anyway, he was in Burma, in one of the monasteries, and that was when the Japanese took over Thailand and the English were in charge of Burma. So these were war enemies. And I have heard that the English thought all Thai monks were spies. And so it was very dangerous for this Thai monk to stay in Burma. He was advised to make the long, dangerous journey by foot through the mountains back into Thailand. Now, I've never crossed that border between Thailand and Burma, but I've lived on the edge of that border, and I just know how steep those mountain hills are, even the paths. They go up and down, a very steep angle. And so I could get some feeling for how difficult that walk would have been, and how there would be no people to help him. And according to his biography, that he got so dehydrated himself, and so famished, he hadn't eaten for days, because there was no one to feed him. There's no villages, there's nothing there, just it was jungle. And he remembered what he'd read in some of the suttas, that sometimes heavenly beings would help good monks in times of great difficulty. And he actually thought that he was a good monk. He was only doing this journey because of, unforeseen circumstances and wars. So he made a resolution. Ajahn Chorb said, if there really are heavenly beings, can one come and help him? Because he was a good monk and he could very easily die. And he made that resolution, and only a couple of minutes later he turned a bend in the path and saw a man standing by the side of the path. And that man was dressed in modern clothes, actually modern Thai clothes. And having lived in those jungles, the people who actually live there, they dress in rags. And to see someone so well dressed in the middle of the jungle was weird enough. And number two, that he was waiting silently with a tiffin can. A tiffin can with these little trays, about 4 of them. One would have rice, one would have some curries and some fruit. And it was how people would take meals when they worked in the fields in central Thailand. And he saw this man with a tiffin can, just waiting there silently. Now, in our forest monks tradition, we never stop to ask anything. So he walked right past that man. And it was only when he'd walked maybe half a meter past that the man said, and he could hear him, Nimon Krap. Are there any Thai people here in the audience today? Any Thais? Okay. Well, Nimon Krap is a word of invitation to a monk. We invite you, Venerable Sir. And he stopped. He turned round, this monk, opened up the lid of his bowl, and this Thai man, appearing in the middle of the jungle, put some of the most clean, delicious Bangkok food into his bowl. There's a difference. I know that because in the jungles in the northeast, it's just whatever crawls on the ground. Never any rice, usually potato, because that's all they can dig up. And in that time it would have been worse. And it was hot food. The whole thing was just totally impossible, but it was happening. And it could not have been coincidence. No way could anyone know he was coming. They didn't have Google Maps. He didn't have email to say, I'll be there tomorrow. There was none of that. This was in 1940 or something, 44. So, having filled this monk's bowl with delicious food to keep him alive, the monk made a little, I'm not calling it a mistake, he bent the rules because he asked this man, where are you from? You're not supposed to say anything to your donors like that. You're supposed to just be quiet and accept it with gratitude, maybe give a blessing, but not ask, where are you from? Because he hadn't seen the village for days. So the man replied, silently, and that was in Ajahn Chor's biography. I always remembered that. Do you believe that's possible? I never did. But I thought, let's give this a test. I was dehydrated. I was a good monk. I did keep my precepts. I was meditating, living simply, facing ghosts. So I said, okay, if there are heavenly beings, and I want you to find out, please help me. I'm going to walk into that village, and if there are heavenly beings, can I please have a Pepsi? That's what he used to drink. The water was really dodgy. You didn't know whether it was clean or not, but at least a Pepsi Cola, it's always nice and clean, and a bit of caffeine in it and some sugar, keep you going. So anyway, I walked down into that village, and I was a good monk. I kept my eyes body length in front of me on the ground. I never looked to the left or to the right, never said anything. But I did notice in the corner of my eye the general store. There was one there, and I knew they would have Pepsi Colas there. But I walked right past and no one stopped me. And of course you think, there's no heavenly beings. And then I heard the sound, Nimon Krap! The words of invitation. And the reason I had to walk past, because it takes time to take the lid off a Pepsi Cola and put a straw in. And this man was running after me with an open bottle of Pepsi Cola to give to me. Do you think, hang on, it gets better? That was actually, I'm not exaggerating, that was actually quite amazing, but I was still skeptical. It could have been just a coincidence. But then another woman came running out with another bottle of Pepsi Cola. And then another man with a third bottle. And then another with a fourth open bottle. And then a fifth bottle of Pepsi Cola. And then someone came running out with a sixth bottle. And then a seventh bottle. And then an eighth bottle of Pepsi Cola. And then a ninth bottle of Pepsi Cola. I had 9 bottles of Pepsi Cola. And anybody who knows Thailand, that is a magic number in Thailand, 9. If I'd have done that trick in some remote part of Malaysia, I would have got 8 bottles, because 8 is a magic number here. So I had 9 bottles of Pepsi Cola. And there was a bench there, a very simple place to sit down. I put the 9 bottles in front of me, all open. I didn't drink any yet. Wow. Okay, heavenly beings, you won. I now have confidence in you. Yes, you do exist. And I drank a little bit from each bottle. There's no way you can drink 9 bottles of Pepsi Cola, even if you're thirsty, and gave the rest to some kids who were playing around in that village. And that really taught me a wonderful lesson. I made that resolution, if there are, please give me a Pepsi. And they gave me 9 to make sure I never doubted their existence again. And that's been, yeah, okay, go on. And that has been sometimes a story of my life. Very often, I'm senior monk, leading monk, you start some of these projects, you sort of give support to the Buddhist fellowship, getting a new center. You really want to encourage them as much as possible, not just the Buddhist fellowship. I get myself involved in so many other people's projects. Sometimes they look at me, I don't know why they do this as the main fundraiser. I don't have any funds. But I have this great confidence and faith in the heavenly beings. When there's something which is beautiful, needs to be done, they always seem to come and help. As with this story, I'm going off on a tangent as usual. So I sometimes say, you didn't talk about how to deal with the future, but it is sort of how to deal with the future. If it's something good you are doing, you never need to doubt. Pang Hong, you're taking responsibility for getting a new center. And of course, I'm right behind you. It's a good thing to do. If you fail and go to jail, I'll be in the next cell next to you. Because I know how these things work. When we decided to get some land for the nuns in Perth, people were driving me around looking for suitable blocks of land, and then we went up to one part of Perth, to this small 30-acre bit of farmland. I don't know why they took me up there, because it was hopeless. Basically, I don't matter how much funds we have in the bank or don't have, I'm not going to allow it to be spent on this small plot of land, which is not inspiring, which is not going to help anybody. But on the way, there was a big advertisement for 560-something acres of beautiful solitude. And I thought, that sounds good. And the man driving the car said, "Oh, forget about it, Ajahn Brahm, that will cost a fortune. We can't raise that." And on the way back, I said, "It doesn't cost anything to look." So we went and looked, and my goodness, it was a beautiful block of land. It had the water, the solitude, the mountains, so close to Perth, but secluded. If you want to know how much 563 acres are, it's 2 kilometers long by 1.1 kilometer wide. It's about the size of the Catholic's Vatican city-state. I've got big plans for that place. But anyhow, that we can't afford it. But then we found it was on auction. And on auctions, you never know how much it's going to go for. So let's give it a try. And because I was fully behind it, our committee decided to, let's give it a try. If we don't have enough money, it doesn't matter. So we counted, people pledged, see how much we can borrow, how much we can somehow squeeze from another account for the time being. And we came up with the amount, this was stretching it, 600,000 Aussie dollars. That would be really, really tough for us to repay some of the loans we'd have to get. But 600,000 was our limit. So what do I do next? What I did next was to go with another monk 1 hour before the auction started, get onto that land, and do some really powerful, super duper, really incredibly deep chanting. We chanted and chanted and I don't think that's illegal, but we did it. And even though you were a bit hoarse after an hour's really tough chanting, we decided to see if it would work. And our monks don't have much excitement in life. But that was exciting. There was a nun's monastery on the line here. Were we going to get it or not? But that was just really tough. So when we started bidding, that's when I had to be quiet. We had one of our members would be the bidder. I think many of you know him, Eddie Fernando. He was a Singaporean before he migrated to Perth. Good old Eddie. Because we said, you can bid up to 600,000, no more. And when the bidding started, 400, 425, 450, do I hear 475, 475 over there, 500, 525, 550, even I started to get excited. And Eddie put his hand up, 600,000. That was our limit. And I started my chanting again. please, heavenly beings, keep everybody's mouth closed. It's a bit unfair, isn't it? Someone said 625. Oh no. I thought so close, but so far. But never mind, that's life. This is when you have to let go. Where you realize you tried your best, it's not meant to be. And I did let go. And then Eddie put his hand up again. 650? And the treasurer was standing next to me. We can't afford this. Stop him, Ajahn Brahm. Disown him. He's not ours. Take away his membership of the BSWA. And I think, my response, I said, no. Somehow or other, we'll manage. So the treasurer almost resigned on the spot. And it was passed in at 650. We got it. We didn't know how we were going to pay for it. We did get it. And then when I told the people of Nolamara, who said, we could only afford 600,000, but we managed to buy it for 650. They did exactly what you did. They gave a standing ovation. They really wanted it. And it's because people wanted it, they could see its beauty and how wonderful it would be. Of course, the extra 50,000 came very easily, simply because you were working on inspiration. And that inspiration is something which is, as a fundraiser, that's how you work it. If it's something which is beautiful, the Buddhist fellowship, getting a place for the first time, you'd be amazed at what happens. So you don't need to worry about the future. Worry that the present moment, you're a good person, keeping precepts, being kind, being selfless, being generous. If you're looking at the quality of your life and how good you are and what you're actually doing, it's not that hard at all to raise funds for something as worthy as a home for the Buddhist fellowship. And this is one of the reasons why that I've collected so many amazing stories which are true. I do make up jokes, but I will let you know when it's a joke and when it's true. And one of those really goosebump eliciting stories was when there was a young American man. He was in the Peace Corps in Thailand for 2 or 3 years, and after finishing in the Peace Corps, he decided he wanted to become a monk, to try it out, but he didn't know how to do it. So he was staying in a hotel on the outskirts of Bangkok, and he asked the concierge, how do I become a monk? Now the concierge was used to telling Americans how to do other things in Bangkok, but becoming a monk was not what he was used to. So he did say, there is a monastery in Bangkok called Wat Bhawan. I know that monastery. I've been there many times to stay. They offer accommodation. It's pretty central and comfortable, very rich monastery. And sometimes there are Westerners stay there. So he said, go to Wat Bhawan. Go early in the morning with a tiffin can full of food, offer it to one of the senior monks on alms round and ask him, can I become a monk? That's how it's done. So he didn't give perfect instructions because this American went there so early in the morning, everything was locked up. And there was hardly anybody around that time of the morning. And so he was walking up and down, all the doors and gates were locked, not knowing what to do. And as he was walking, not knowing what to do or when the monks are going to come out, a Thai man came up to him and asked him what he was doing in perfect English. And the American said, well, I want to be a monk, and this is what I was told to do. I've obviously got it wrong. And the Thai man said to him, you've come too early. But doesn't matter, I have the keys, I can let you inside. And he had these keys and opened this iron gate. And having opened the door, took this monk to be, this American, into the main Uposatha hall, where people get ordained. He turned on the electric lights in this hall, opened the main doors of the hall, and took this American inside, and showed him all these paintings which were on that wall. And this was 150, 200 years ago these were painted. And if you've ever seen those traditional Thai artwork, you will notice that these are stories which are either from the time of the Buddha or their Jataka tales or something. But they're like a cartoon. But most cartoons which we'd read in newspapers in Singapore, they start from the left and they go to the right, then there's another line. These go all over the place. And if you don't recognize the story, you can't actually see. You can't see the cause and effect, what comes first, what comes afterwards. But this Thai man knew these stories perfectly. And it was so fascinating to listen to. Even the stories of who offered these and why. In those days when they were painted, people would die of things like typhoid, or obviously malaria as well. And he said this one over here was offered by the family of a young boy who got typhoid in the jungle. And they did this as an act of merit making for him. And this Thai man knew so much. And after he'd taken him to the last painting in this Uposatha hall, this ordination hall where they do the main ceremonies, then he said, it's almost time now, so you go out of the gate, I will turn the lights off and lock up. And if you go to that middle gate there, in about 5 minutes there will be an old monk who will come out. He's the one who you should ask, I want to be a monk. And that's what he did. And this old monk came out and said to this young man, wait here, I'm going on alms round. When I come back, I'll take you inside. And that's what happened. And that's how he started his training to be a Buddhist monk. But to be a Buddhist monk, some of you may have done temporary ordinations. But to be a Buddhist monk, there's a lot of things to learn. Not just the chanting, but the basic rules of the Vinaya, what to do, how to wear your robes, where to put them, all this other stuff. It's a lot to learn. So he had a monk who was his mentor. And after a few days, this American complained. He could not understand the accent of the mentor. The mentor's English was not that good. So he said, can I have another monk? And the other monk said, this is the best we've got. This fellow's the best English speaker in the whole monastery. And that is when this American said, what about that temple attendant who met me that first day? What temple attendant? The one who let me in that gate. You can't go through that gate. Even I know that much. I know that temple. That gate, a wrought iron gate, is only allowed for royalty. That's when the kings, the queens, the crown princes, only when they go through that gate can other senior monks go through there. And he said, no one's got that key, only the abbot, not a temple attendant. And when he started saying all these impossible things, they said, you better come to the abbot right now. And he went to the abbot, and the abbot started listening to him and stopped him and said, hold on, this has to be recorded because this is something very, very weird. Again, no one knew all those stories of those murals, not even the old abbot. He didn't know. And he was the most senior, eldest monk in the whole place. So they took down his statement, and that is now in the annals of what Bhagavani Wait, Royal Temple. And at the end of taking down all of this information, the abbot, who later became the head monk in Thailand, Somdet Jnana Sangwara, I used to call him Jnana Sangwon, he asked him, what did this Thai man look like? Because he basically doesn't exist. We don't let these keys go with temple attendants. No one can open those doors. Even where he was supposed to turn the electricity on, you can't. The whole thing was weird. And he spoke with such a good accent, English accent, yeah. What did he look like? And this American said something, totally inappropriate. Well, how do I know? You Thais all look the same. You know what people say. But he was trying to be helpful, and that's when this American man was scratching his head, like people do. And then he stopped scratching his head. The American man froze. And in great surprise, pointed to a painting on the wall of the abbot's office. It was him. That's the man. It was him. It was a portrait of one of the main sponsors of Wat Bhagavani Wait Temple, King Rama IV, who died over 100 years ago, more than that. Now, you may say that, how do I know that? And because it's these stories which go around, but I knew that American monk. But also, many years ago when I came to Singapore, I was invited to give a talk at the Thai embassy. And when I gave a talk at the Thai embassy, the ambassador was listening. And after I told that story, the ambassador put his hand up, stood up, and said, I just would like to let you know, Ajahn Brahm and everybody else, that story is 100% true, because I am on the committee who looks after Wat Bhagavani, the lay committee. And I've read that report. It's in our history books of the history of Wat Bhagavani. It was true. A Thai king, now reborn in another realm, heavenly being, came down to help an American man become a monk. That's weird. Supernatural, yes, but true. Told to you by a theoretical physicist. And I love stories like that. It shows there's more to this world than actually people think. And am I out of time yet? 5 minutes, okay. So the last weird, I'm on to weird stories now. The last of these weird stories is more personal. This was about 19 years ago, our Buddhist society in Western Australia were going to celebrate our 30th anniversary since formation. And Ajahn Jakra, the former abbot, had left already, so I was in charge. And our president at that time was a young man called Saul Hannah. Sorry. I get excited telling these stories because I know that they're true and they've got beautiful endings. Our president was a guy called Saul Hannah, and he was the youngest president we've ever had in our Buddhist society of Western Australia. When they asked me, "Are you sure he's a good president? Shouldn't we get someone more experienced?" And I said, no. He's been a monk before, a short time, and he's got lots of ideas. And if anybody know anything about the BSWA, we were pioneers in podcasting. And it was this guy Saul who was at the forefront of making sure that all the talks which someone like me or Ajahn Brahmali later on gave were all put online, and podcasts were made available for everybody. He told me that he was on not the leading edge of IT, the bleeding edge, because we wasted a lot of money, but it was worth it. Because we didn't really know what was going to work, but the money is there, use it. You know where I learned that? I learned that from you, Singaporeans and Malaysians, who told me it's the uncles and aunties who have the funds, it's the young people who have the ideas. So your job is to create the funding and give these young people these wonderful ways of spending it, which will waste a lot of money, but will create new avenues for spreading the Dhamma. And Saul, he was even interviewed once by the BBC in London because he realized our BSWA in Perth was a leader in podcasting and getting it together. So he was our president. And together, Saul and I, when we knew it was going to be 30th anniversary of the Buddhist Society of Western Australia, you've heard me say this even this afternoon, whatever you do, give it everything you've got, don't hold back. And that's what we did. We wanted to show that Buddhism has arrived in Australia. And so everything was working out so well. We had a block of government land called Supreme Court Gardens in the centre of Perth, which was used to hold big events. Our anniversary was on Wesak in May, a Sunday, a perfect timing. People would have time off. It was a full moon. It was May. The weather should be okay. So we hired it, and it was available, which shocked me. We invited people, all the important people we could, to come for this event. Money wasn't an object. I shouldn't say this, but I'm a monk. I don't have to do without. But no, we were going to do a very big show. We'd invited the Thai ambassador, we invited big shots like the premier of that time of Western Australia was a gentleman called Jeff Gallop. And Jeff Gallop, he went to Oxford where he was the best friend of Tony Blair, who happened at that time to be the Prime Minister in UK. It was Jeff Gallop was Tony Blair and Cherry Blair's best man at their wedding. They were that close. And I started fantasizing at the time. If we managed to get Jeff Gallop as a Buddhist, Tony Blair would be easy. And then we get Mr. Bush, because Tony Blair was very sort of friendly with Mr. Bush. And then we'd have the whole Western world as Buddhists. Anyway, it didn't quite work like that. But nevertheless, what happened next, we really made a lot of effort into making this a very good event. We got a big new Buddha statue, golden one from Thailand. And that gold